Good evening. Andre is Mr. 3 is on the 5, so he'll be here about 6:15. But I think we should just start if you guys are okay with that. Jess, you good? Yep. Like to call the meeting to order for Wednesday, October 19th, 2022, 6 o'clock. We have one agenda item. We'll say that a couple of times. One agenda item. Meet with the school committee and discuss the school renovation project, introduction of owner project manager, and review project/construction timeline. So with that, I can now turn this off, and somebody is going to take.
I can start.
Marianne?
Yeah, I got it. So what's before you on this agenda is the introduction of the owner project manager and then go through the timeline. So at this point, I would like to introduce you to Peregrine Group, who is the owner project manager, and joining us this evening is Sam Bradner. Also, who is helping Sam, who is not here present tonight, is Eric Andrust, who we'll be seeing a lot more of him as we go along. To give you a little background on Peregrine Group, I first met Sam probably a good 4 or 5 years ago, and have worked with him on a number of projects I was involved with in South Kingston. They've also been actively involved in Barrington, Central Falls, Portsmouth, and also for those of you who are familiar with the new East Providence High School project, they were the OPMs on that project also. So what, I'll be quiet really quickly here. Sam is going to go through the schedule, activities to date. The building committee has met for the first time. 5 of us was there, 1 was absent, and then 2 members had not been appointed as of yet, and hopefully this evening that's on your agenda, the council agenda, to appoint those 2 remaining members. And then the committee is meeting again, I think it's the 26th of October. Don't quote me on that date. And they will be meeting on a continual basis once these projects get moving along. We have a number of things that we've done and accomplished in the 2 hours that we've met, and we will be continually meeting. So at this point, I will turn it over to Sam, and he'll take it from here.
Oh, there we go. Can everybody hear me? I believe some folks have received a copy of this, but I do have multiple copies for anybody that wants a copy of the. We have just a summary memo as well as a schedule. Yep. No, it's actually 2 pages. You guys have it 2-sided. Yep. You're more efficient than I was. And I have more if anybody needs anything. So just a quick overview of Peregrine. Thank you, Marianne, for that introduction. Peregrine Group, we are a East Providence-based owner's project manager and real estate advisory company. We've been in business. We just celebrated 20 years last year, a year and a half ago. We've worked extensively throughout New England and a lot in Rhode Island. We've worked a lot in the K-12, public K-12 work over the past 6 years now. Barrington Middle School, Marianne mentioned, was one of the first projects post-lifting of the moratorium that was built and turned over in 2019. Since then, we've worked on East Providence High School, which is the largest school project so far in the state, that just opened back in 2020. We're working in Central Falls, Portsmouth. We've worked in North Kingstown, South Kingstown. We've actually done a little bit of work on Island. My business partner, Colin Kane, who I think some folks are familiar with, are managing the New Harbor Boat Basin and all the property over there that is owned by the Mott family. So we've spent a lot of time looking at trying to see improvements that could happen over there. Obviously at a very challenging time when it comes to construction costs and everything else. So familiar with the island, but we know we're not islanders, so we'll never make that statement. So we were engaged in probably late August is when we formally started to jump into the process. Since then, we've really been going through kind of a laundry list of what we think is kind of baseline due diligence that we think is important to really get these projects going. So we've had multiple meetings with the ownership team, the leadership team, and that being the town manager, the superintendent, the head of facilities for the community. Really just trying to get a lay of the land, understand what was approved in your stage 2 process, which is the document that RIDE approved And, all the folks in the community, I think, are familiar with that. We've had several offline conversations with the team members at the RIDE School Building Authority. They are the team that oversees all these projects throughout the state. We've also met with Secotio Architects. They are the architects that prepared your Stage 2 document. And also, I believe they've been working with the community and specifically with the school district for several years on multiple projects. So out of all that, we really started to kind of create some of the key tools that we think are important to get the project going. Schedule, which we'll talk about in a minute, which is attached to the back of this document. And then also, we're in the middle of negotiating a contract with Secotio to take the project forward from beginning of design all the way through to completion of construction. And they're really one of the key cogs in this whole process, is getting the architect on board so that they can actually start the work of taking the Stage 2, which was a 250-page document, and starting to take all the projects that are in there and turn them into actual documents that then ultimately can go out to bid in the marketplace and go through that construction process. We've reviewed the budget that was submitted through the RIDE process. We understand that there was a financial town meeting back in May where the community discussed the amount of, the dollar amount that was going to be approved. So what we're doing right now in response to RIDE's kind of baseline request is taking that budget and turning it into a cash flow analysis. So really trying to map out all the dollars that need to be spent over the course of the project, how much those are, and when those will be expended. So we'll be getting a draft of that to the leadership team in the coming days, and that will be part of your MOA, your Memorandum of Agreement between the community and the SBA, and we'll really kind of get that process going and start to open up at least some of those dollars that are available through that process. Yes, sir.
The gym has been a problem for a long time.
Yep.
How do we look to you and Charlie to help assure us that the money we're spending there is on the right solution for that building? Geothermal's another one. Like, yep. What can the town expect in terms of vetting those kinds of things from you?
Yeah, so we see our role as, we're kind of the quarterback of the process. As part of that process, though, we want to do a deep dive on the plan set. We want to understand the designs that went into the Stage 2, working with the building committee and the school committee leadership to say, okay, this is what was proposed in Stage 2. Is that the right solution? I think in general, the approval was around, HVAC, the gymnasium exterior, and some of the educational enhancements. Now, how we get to there, I think, is now you really have to get into the detail of that process. At last week's building committee meeting, we already started with a discussion with Tom and some of the others about, okay, what is really the HVAC solution that is going to work and satisfy the needs of the district for the day-to-day use, but also the community, and also how do you fit all that into a budget number? So that process will happen multiple times as we enter into this. So, and we'll talk about it in the schedule, but you'll see there's multiple steps in the design process where each of those will have a design. It'll go out for estimating. It'll come back. It'll likely be high, each of those steps. And each of those steps, you got to compress and make decisions about design. But to the efficacy of the solution, yes, we're very much part of that. Working with the architect, talking to folks in the marketplace, understanding the work that we've done. I know you have a great building committee that's got, expertise in these areas too. So we rely on that collective group to really kind of drive that process with us, obviously being the folks that are pushing the rope down the road. Yep. So just on schedule, and I'll apologize for the form, for folks that work in the industry, this document, which is on the back, I think, of your second page, is a common way to present schedule. It's not the easiest thing to read. And we can certainly, as we come back before this body and the school committee, we're happy to to transform it into a more easily understandable document, and that'll be something that we'll learn together with what you guys prefer, so. Okay, so. This is more for graphic presentation, that we compress all the Gantt side of it. But what you'll see, and I'll just go through the high level, the big moving parts, and what I'll say is, we know a little bit about everything that needs to happen right now. You know, we're in the very early stages. What we tried to do, and we did it, we had a session with the leadership team, members of the architecture team on island, probably about a month and a half ago now, and we did what we call a card trick. So we sat there in one of the rooms and basically tried to map out the whole process. How do we get design going, or even backing up, getting a contract for all the appropriate parties? How do we get design going? How long will each design step take for each project? And you'll see that broken down here. And then how long will it take to go out to bid? What are the procurement timelines that the district and the community typically see when you guys bid work? And then one of the most challenging things, and it's challenging even in a normal condition, never mind on a place like Block Island, how do we manage and think about the construction timing? And you know, you guys are experts at this. You live and breathe the challenges of being in a remote location every day, just with the normal process, never mind construction. So we made some assumptions on the schedule that we know are going to change. We assumed that as soon as we got to completion of design and bidding, that we would just go right into a construction project. We know that that is not the reality, because we have to consider the occupied nature of the building, making sure that your learners and your teachers have a safe environment and with the least amount of disruption as possible. But then we also need to balance that with timing. So and then your school off season is also the island high season. So how do we deal with the cost of bringing tradespeople out here at the height of the season, when even getting on the boat can be a challenge, never mind housing and moving materials and folks back and forth from the mainland to get that work done. So we have not solved for or asked all the questions that we need to in the schedule, and I'll say that very clearly up front. We talked about it at the building committee as well. But we've at least tried to understand the general parameters of what all this work will take. A few things just to understand in the schedule also is, you are on a ticking clock with the school building authority's approval. One of the incentives that came, that the community received, was what they call educational enhancements, which is a great thing that can be added, and it gives you 5% more on top of your 35% baseline housing aid reimbursement. And obviously every dollar is critical for the reimbursement side from a financial standpoint, and ultimately the impact to you as taxpayers and the community. That educational enhancement bonus requires that you be under contract by December 31st of 2023. So that is really going to push this process forward, where you need to finish all your design and get under contract for all this work prior to that date in order to be eligible for that bonus at the end of the projects. And while we all sit here on October 19th and say, okay, that's 12 months away or 14 months away, should be a piece of cake, when you start to look at the pieces of the schedule, we're actually right up against that time frame already. Now, you know, will RIDE adjust those dates? We don't know. They've certainly have extended them in the past, over the past couple of years, partly I think due to the pandemic and how that's really stretched out timelines. But I can't tell whether they're going to make that additional adjustment. So until we hear otherwise, we need to drive that process that gets you to that point. And what we've done here on the schedule is we've broken it down into the major projects. So I'll just walk through them really quickly. HVAC obviously being the largest component of your project, of your submittal and your approvals. That's, you know, more than 2/3 of the total approval of the project, and the most intensive when it comes to a design and a construction standpoint. So what we've done, and you'll see this pattern in each of these projects, is we've mapped out the 3 major design steps: schematic, design development, and construction documents. At the conclusion of construction documents, ideally you're ready to go out to bid. So each of those steps involve a pretty intensive design process, completion of that, agreement by the approving bodies, so whether it's the school building committee at first, to say, okay, we agree with the intent of the plans, now we're going to put them out for a cost estimate. That cost estimate comes back. Again, it's usually higher than what you want it to be, unfortunately. Then you work on reconciling that cost back to where the budget needs to be. And then once that is approved, you then submit to RIDE for their review and approval. And that happens 3 times in the design process before you go out to bid. So you can already see the schedule starting to compress, right? Because each of those steps is going to take a fair amount of time. So what we've tried to do, and all these topics that you see here have a fair amount of detail below them. We've collapsed them for the sake of saving paper and not getting people too intertwined in all the pieces that happen there. But when you look at that HVAC, you'll see that, starting almost immediately, assuming we get this contract wrapped up, schematic goes all the way into the first quarter of 2023. You'll see that design development actually starts ahead of that because we're trying to stagger these steps while we're waiting for cost estimating. We're making the assumption that we are going to proceed with that next design step, even if we know that we have cost reconciliation that needs to happen. That happens again until the middle of next year, and then the final step is those construction documents that get you to Q4 of 2023. Then you go out to bid. Hopefully you get the responses that you need. Hopefully your estimates, which are conducted by the architect, are in alignment. I think one of the challenges, and everybody here has heard about it, the fluctuation in construction costs over the last 24 to now 30 months has been, unprecedented. So we've seen some line items are 30 to 40% higher than they were pre-pandemic. And just when we think things are settling down, they're not. So even the cost estimators have really been caught back on their heels because they just, every 60 days you're seeing this adjustment that's happening in the marketplace. So we're trying to put our expertise, the cost estimators' expertise, and the architect's expertise all to the table to say, okay, where are we seeing this? We also don't want to you don't want to overcorrect on some of this pricing either, and then, because what ends up happening is you have to reduce your scope, and that's not uncommon, that you have to make adjustments as you go through the project in order to get you to budget. We don't have a choice of going over budget. You approved an amount, we have to work to that amount. Now that may mean making adjustments on the expectations of what the deliverable is. And all those steps have to be reviewed with, all the stakeholders that are in this room and beyond. So we map that out for each of the major components. The gymnasium and the educational enhancements are on the next bucket of items. And then a much smaller component, which is plumbing fixtures and some other smaller stuff that was part of the stage 2 process. We know some of this work actually maybe has already been done, so we need to just understand what that status is. And again, the construction periods on each of these steps assumes that you go out to bid and you start work. We know that, yeah, and we know that that's not how things happen. We think that, our hope is that as we start to explore some of this, that, the exterior improvements for the gymnasium, because of the nature of that work, could that happen while there's folks in the building? Yes, no, maybe. We have to talk with school leadership, with the principal, with the superintendent, understand how disruptive that is. Is second shift an option? Is, how much can you fit into those 75 days in the summer? And is it practical? And what do all those things impact on the cost standpoint? And then, we had a lot of conversations so far about the most efficient way is to house folks on the island while you're doing the work. Was that part of the budget? It's not, it wasn't really part of, the analysis from what we can see, or what was in there was clipped by RIDE when they went through their review and approval process. So we all know that folks traveling over here on a daily basis is the most inefficient way to do work. We've seen enough of it. We've tried to analyze it in our work over at the boat basin and realized that it's a profound impact on your cost. So those are all the things that we've got to work through, figure out how much of the budget does that eat up and take away from actual work or implemented work, and then the disruption and how do you balance disruption, housing, working during when people are occupied or not occupied, and trying to figure out all those moving parts. So it's a very challenging. It's a lot easier to build a brand new school next to an old school and then just move the kids over. That's what we just did in East Providence. That's what we did in Barrington. By no means was it easy, but that's a much cleaner process because you're able to just kind of put up a fence and work on one side of the fence or the other. we're up for the task. We know the community is up for the task, but we know we have a lot of hard work to kind of go through. And these documents will evolve really on probably a month-to-month basis as we learn more, as we are going to kind of talk to our construction partners in the marketplace to understand the obstacles that they see out here. We know there's a couple contractors that have done work out here, and we're certainly familiar with them, so that we can start to understand those bogeys that are out there that are really going to impact the project both cost and schedule-wise. And then thinking about, again, the soft side of it, which is don't impact learning and teaching, make sure that the community has transparency into the process, and knows what's going on. Maybe not every day, but at least on a recurring basis. So that's just a quick summary. I can talk all night, but I know you guys have other other activities. Happy to answer questions from the entire group. And I don't mean to put my back to anybody. I'm trying to.
I have a question. I just may be looking for something that's, included somewhere else, and I'm not understanding it. Way of background, I grew up here, I went to school here. We've had 3 additions I've been involved in one way or the other. Where is the water on the south end of the building?
I'm sorry.
Where is the water problem on the south part of the building?
So our understanding, it's, in that southeast corner, where you have those lower level classrooms, which are part of this improvement process.
But where are they included in here? That's all I'm asking.
They're rolled up into the educational enhancements. That improvement is in that section of the schedule, but by no means has it been thoroughly vetted or thought through. We understand that there's a serious issue there.
Just wanted to be sure it hadn't fallen off.
Yeah, no, we've been made aware of it, and we know that that's something that has to really, we can't just put another Band-Aid on it and you have the same problem 5 years from now, so.
We've had the same problem
I know.
for 60 years that I can speak to.
No, it's just a huge challenge. You made reference to, you'd love to build a new one next to the old one, similar to Yankee Stadium or Shea Stadium. That simplifies things. I'm sure our Health Services Board will be watching this project closely because maybe they can learn from some of the things you do when they finally apply what they have to do with their.
Yeah, I know
at
you
their
have that other
building,
project
too.
going on. Occupied renovations are not easy. They are definitely challenging, but sometimes that is the solution that you have to work with.
I know from one year, the only year I taught at the school was the year that they rebuilt it the first time, Martha. And you needed roller skates if you're going to teach up there because you were going constantly back and forth to different venues with different classes and
Right.
such. So I don't want to undercut the quality of education. So that's certainly
Yeah.
a concern.
And we know that's paramount, so, and again, but you're also trying to balance that with efficiency of construction delivery and trying to figure out where the very narrow middle is between all those items, so.
From a roles point of view, and I guess I'm sort of looking at this corner of the room, from a timing update point of view, can the council get maybe quarterly updates or obviously you guys are the building committee is gonna be weekly or whatever. Facilities director, Marianne, you guys will be intense. I think it would be good just to have a meeting every quarter or maybe more frequently, just a little bit of an update, check step. How deep is the water moment? Is that fair?
Yeah, not just for us, but for the community.
Well, no, it's about the community. That's the point of it, right? Of my comment.
So I think quarterly to start, we may change based on what happens. And one of the things we discussed at the building committee level, and I did this in another life, is, and we could do it in both places, but right now we'll do it at the school, is on their website, it's going to be like a page or a link of the construction. And we're going to start uploading documents. We already have the stage 1, stage 2 application, stuff like this. And once we get rolling, that stuff will be uploaded so the folks on the island will know that it's going on. And one thing that Mark mentioned that sparked something in my head, Most likely, we're going to have two major renovation projects on the island located in the same
Simultaneous.
exact place, happening at the same time. So we already, as the building committee, had already mentioned that to SEAM, that there's a good possibility that the medical center will be also having a major construction project on. And we talked about who's going to, how they're going to juggle the use of the Faulkner project area for staging
And-
projects. So
And-
we've started
and
that.
Thomas.
Yeah, and Thomas, I think, hopefully, I thought of Thomas, hopefully we'll be more on the back end of the Thomas when these things get going. But we've already started that construction, and Tom's laughing at me. Thanks, Tom. I know I can count on you when I need you. But this is, we've already started that conversation, at least we know about it. So that's also going to be a conversation that needs to continue as it relates to coordination of efforts.
So on that website, are you going to start with, 560 days to go and every day it, just joking, just joking.
However you guys
Just
want
joking.
to show
Yeah,
it.
no, just joking.
But I,
Thank you.
The briefings, we can meet, obviously, the school committee, town council, as frequently as you want. I do, I think, especially in these early steps, you don't see a lot of movement, right? You'll see progress of design, which will need to be approved by the school committee before we go to ride each of those times.
Yep.
How we communicate also with the council is obviously at the discretion of this group, so we're
It'd just
happy
be great to
do that.
have a little quarterly,
Yep. Yep.
update, pulse check.
Yep.
And if we need it more frequently or less, see how it goes.
And I think the website ultimately will be a really great tool, at least to kind of show progress, even during construction. Some districts will have pictures, some will have a live camera. You may not want to do that much because there's probably not a lot to see from a camera standpoint. You have to deal with privacy and all that kind of stuff, but
Schools.
there'll be recurring updates that we'll do that will have all that data in it. And again, the elected bodies can kind of decide how you want to push it out to folks that want to review that information.
And
Perfect.
one of the things that Sam did mention that I want to emphasize a little more is the RIDE factor. RIDE is Rhode Island Department of Education, for those that don't know. And we need to go up to them each time we go through the schematics, the design, the construction documents. They need to see those and review those. And that's going to factor into also our scheduling process, because RIDE, I can tell you, if we're in construction documents or we're at that point, so is half the world of the state. So they need to take a look at everything. And sometimes in a projects that we have that are relatively large like this, especially HVAC, they'll be looking at stuff in detail also. Some of the smaller stuff, a lot of times I've been up there with them and they've given us opportunity where I said, okay, you don't need to come back to me. I'm okay with this as long as you do A, B, and C. You can then get your construction documents out. I've also been up there where they said, this is what needs to be changed. Oh, by the way, you need to come back because I want to see that phase of it and those changes. So that also factors in. And Sam put that in the schedule. However, it's another piece of information that may drive or change the schedule as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it at the building committee the other day, is do you do them all in one design package, everything? Or do you break it out because maybe some of the smaller stuff could get through the approval process quicker? And I think we just want to figure out the efficiency of approval processes, bidding. Ideally you'd bid it all as one package, but it may be that HVAC is its own and then the other pieces are their own piece.
I really want to thank you for being here and being part of the team. I will tell you, it's very reassuring to even hear discussions like that, which is how do we package it to get it through RIDE as well as execute, and having those choices and having the experience. So that's great. Any other questions from the audience?
You mentioned that going over budget was not an option, which is wonderful to hear. Are there any contingencies built into the budget?
So when we looked at the budgets that were submitted as part of the stage 2, there was contingencies that are kind of in I would say they're pro forma contingencies that are established in the RIDE format. We see the budget just as a placeholder, and then we're gonna have to reset. We're gonna implement what we think are the right contingencies for the owner to have on their side, so that as you enter into construction, you've got that protection for all the things that we know. You're gonna open up a wall and you're gonna find something that nobody knew was there. Equipment costs are gonna be through the roof, which we already know. But those will mean that you might have to be making adjustments to what at least the originally anticipated scope was. Still macro, still the same scope, but you may be having to make adjustments across all the different projects to kind of achieve that budget. So they don't come without hard decisions, but that's, unfortunately, that's the dynamic nature of construction and especially in the market that we're in right now.
Any other questions, comments?
I just have one comment. Thank you. I don't know if I'm going to be here later when you appoint to the school building committee. I think you have 2 people you're appointing, but I just wanted to put my 2 cents into, if possible, I don't know if you have applications or multiple letters, but to get somebody on there that works in the school daily and has for a long time, I think would be extremely helpful, especially just hearing that with, trying to figure out exactly what's going to happen with the gym and how much you can do outside the gym, people in the gym. I think it'd be really helpful. I know we've had a few teachers who've been to all the meetings and are interested, so I just think it would be really helpful to have somebody on that committee who's in the school every day, actually teaching, so.
Sam, I got one last question for you. It's the issue that concerns me the most, and that's housing. It's a paramount perennial problem out here, and I don't think we can discount it at all. Just give me a little bit more input on just what your plans are for the housing.
For the contractors?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll give you that honest answer. I mean, I think we know that is a serious issue out here. Never mind during the season, even in the off-season. And the demands that I'm sure the construction personnel that probably flock out here on September 1st. So we're going to have to figure out where that balance is. There's probably not enough beds available for those folks. And community members first, and then the construction personnel that come out on a daily basis. We talked about, do you bring out trailered housing on property? I don't know what the right answer is for that, and we're going to try to understand the options. Now, they might not all be suitable for this community or for the budget. The other side of it is, do you have folks that come out here every day and leave every day? And we know that takes an 8 to 9 hour day into a 6 hour day or even a 5 hour day, and that's on a good day. If there's weather, it could be a 2 hour day. So we haven't figured out that piece of the puzzle, but we know it's a serious concern that we've got to try to figure out and understand. And I don't know what the impact will be on the budget either with those solutions.
Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
We look forward to seeing the group again in the quarter, and anything we can do to help, please.
Great. We will yell. You'll be sick of us, I guarantee it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Why don't we close this meeting, and then we can open up the 7 o'clock and all the break, so take a motion to adjourn. Second by Keith. Oh, you'd rather do a recess? Okay, we'll do it. Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. I'm sorry, brother. We'll take a recess till 7 o'clock, if anybody wants to come back. Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. We're going to start the meeting. Peanut Gallery down on the right. Thank you. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the New Shoreham Town Council meeting for Wednesday, October 9th at 7 p.m. I'll call the meeting to order at 7:03. First item on the agenda is public comment. Does anybody have any public comment this evening that doesn't have anything to do with any items on the agenda? Seeing, hearing none. Oh, go ahead, Sven. Just in case people missed it, I think everybody was pleased with the Supreme Court ruling regarding Champlins. After about a 20-year battle, the Supreme Court affirmed the 2020 decision, and the MOU, or quote-unquote, the backroom deal, was denied. And that is pretty much the end of Champlins. We have said that before, but the next appeal would be the U.S. Supreme Court, and I don't think they're going to hear it. So this is hopefully the end, and I believe there's going to be a celebration at the Old Island Pub next Saturday at 5 o'clock for anybody that wants to go. But I think that's pretty impressive news that the town, Black Island Land Trust, Committee for the Great Salt Pond, and the Conservation, Black Island Conservation Group all really drove this home. So thanks to everybody. Thanks, Sven. Anybody else? Item number 3 on the agenda is a proposed public hearing to receive and act on the proposed amendments to the Town of New Shoreham zoning ordinance, Article 2, Section 202, definitions, Article 4, Section 405H, affordable housing, Article 5, Section 513, accessory apartments. I know that the planning board has been working on this for quite some time now, and I see Margie's here.
Yes. So is most of my board, so.
I noticed that also. Thank you all for coming. It's actually kind of a big night, and it's a big to do here for a big plus for housing. So, well, I'll let Margie, if you want to speak to the changes, or.
I think Allison is supposed to be on Zoom doing this.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Could you hear me?
Yes, Allison is here, as well as our attorneys, James Callahan, the town attorney. So I'll make a motion to open the public hearing. Second. Seconded by Sven. All those in favor? Keith? Martha? Aye. I'm in favor. Sven? Aye. Mark?
Aye.
The motion will carry. Margie, you want to fill us in on?
I think Allison is prepared to give you some comments.
Allison?
Yes, I'm here. I could introduce the item and go through some of the changes. So, yes, as you said, the planning board has been working on these section 513 amendments for several months. One of the main goals of the amendments is to encourage the production of additional attainable housing units on the island. As we all know, affordable housing and attainable housing is a big priority to the town council as well as the planning board. So first, you may notice with these amendments that section 513 always has been referred to as accessory apartments. So there was a consensus to recommend changing that terminology to use accessory dwelling units, as that's a more common terminology for that type of housing, and also is more of a general description for that type of housing. In summary, the zoning amendments, the goal was to kind of give even more flexibility to property owners. So what the planning board recommended is changing the maximum number of bedrooms allowed by right in an accessory dwelling unit to 3 bedrooms. Currently, there is a maximum of 2 bedrooms in the zoning ordinance for that use. The draft amendments also establishes a maximum of 3 ADUs per lot in the commercial zones by right. Currently, the language isn't quite clear as to the maximum number of units on a lot. The draft amendments include a 1% building lot coverage bonus provided to lots under 120,000 square feet, and also an allowance of greater living area. So there's a 1,200 square foot maximum by right. This would allow 1,500 square feet, with a special use permit. And if the structure, if there's an existing structure, this has come up where there might be, a property owner might have an existing structure that they'd like to utilize for an accessory dwelling unit, but it exceeds that 1,200 square foot maximum. So this ordinance would allow, with a special use permit, up to 1,800 square feet for an accessory dwelling unit. So hopefully capture some existing structures that are already on the island and you be able to utilize or repurpose them for this use. Also with a special use permit, a greater number of bedrooms, even beyond the 3 bedrooms. So if someone for some reason needs 4 bedrooms, additional dwelling unit even on, so what right now in the residential zones, 1 accessory dwelling unit, in addition to obviously the primary residential structure. These amendments with a special use permit would allow a second accessory dwelling unit, potentially if it meets the standards. Within the town accessory apartments section that was recently reinstated, there was a standard added that if if there were no town employees that needed that unit, that it could be rented to a low and moderate, income qualified household on the island. In regards to, I know it's cited here, section 405 affordable housing. It's just a strike of the language that references subsection B, affordable accessory apartments. That subsection is proposed to be eliminated for a number of reasons. Currently and historically, no section 513, the accessory apartments were utilizing this tax benefit. They weren't considered, like they weren't deed restricted and therefore didn't qualify for that. An ADU can be affordable and accessory. It could be deed restricted and considered affordable without the existence of that subsection. And there's been some talk about drafting another section and kind of recrafting that maybe with more generous benefits for low and moderate income restricted accessory dwelling units. So for now, that subsection is being proposed for elimination. And then finally, section 202, your definitions section of the zoning ordinance, the definition of accessory apartment. There are 2 definitions. So accessory apartment changed to accessory dwelling unit, and the proposed definition was changed to be more consistent with what the state's definition for an accessory dwelling unit is. Currently, you see there's language in there that says within an existing accessory structure. So we want to make sure that was changed. And then accessory dwelling unit, there was a second definition in there that wasn't consistent with state law. But so this will clean things up and have that one definition of accessory dwelling unit. So that's, I'm sure there are some questions, but I just want to at least provide that summary to start the conversation.
Thank you, Allison.
Yep.
Council have any questions or comments?
I'm sure I'll have more, but a couple of things. One is there was a lot of work that went into this. One of the things that Allison doesn't mention is that in the middle of considering this, the state passed a law around accessory dwelling units, so that our ordinance had to change. And I know that Jen and Allison and Bill Landry and the planning board, so they had to contend with a lot of moving parts, not just the sort of policy imperative. As I said before, I think this is an important step, but it is to me ought to be the beginning of work that we do on these sections of the ordinance, and I know that's where the planning board is. I've been to a number of their meetings, and I really appreciate the work. I'm looking forward to the meeting. We talked about having just a work session with the planning board to sort of talk all of these things through so that we can develop some policy consensus around using the ordinances, zoning ordinances and accessory dwelling unit ordinances, et cetera, to try to not just make the ground fertile, but to try to provide advantages to the development of accessory structures. So thank you all for your work. Really appreciate it.
I was going to say, I have two areas that I definitely want to dig into, but I think I'm going to hold off. Those areas, just because I don't want to duplicate folks, would be this new B2, the standards for residential in section 3, where it just talks a lot about 513, what happens about affidavits and if things are terminated. And then also in section, what I guess is now DF, where if you get this 1% bump up in lot coverage, some weird things start happening. And suddenly there's discussions around, you know, how to, so if the person gets this 1% bump up coverage and then stops their 513, what happens? And it's a little funky to me right now how the wording is. So we'll talk about that later, but I'm sure others will have that same. So I think just hear from folks.
Thanks, Sven. Anybody else? Good. Martha, you good?
Yeah, I think this has been there. But it's one of these odd things about the main entrance. You can only have one main entrance on the street side of the building. Do you know what I'm talking about? That doesn't really even fit historic houses out here, old houses out here. You'd very often have the front door in the front of the main house and the kitchen door in the front of the L. I mean, I know it's an odd thing to be looking at, and probably should have looked at it a long time ago, but it just seems like there's some things in here that are unnecessary, and take it out while we got the chance.
Allison, can you speak to that question?
You heard me?
Oh, that's on? Oh.
So sorry. Okay. So yes, as Martha stated, it is existing language. It's within the general standards. And I believe probably the original intent of that is that was there to, what the intent is so that the structure, this is for when the accessory dwelling unit is within the primary structure. So wanting it to have the appearance of a single family. So that's why that design standard is in there, that it retains its predominant character as a single family. So not having two front doors, so that the accessory dwelling unit would be accessed from the side or rear of that same structure, or at least like the appearance that it is. So that's why that's in there. That's just language that's existed since this was originally crafted.
I know, my bad for not looking at it.
Yeah.
But it's silly. It's not, Amy, you have your front door is in the front of your house. Your kitchen door would be on the front of the house. The Mitchell Farm has the front door in the main house and the kitchen door on the same side of the house. these are older houses on the island. It just, I don't, everybody, I know everybody else is looking at all the technicalities and tax ramifications, and I'm just looking at what exists and what's,
And so,
It's just-
Martha,
it's-
that's existed for a long time,
I
right?
know, but it's
Right.
still, it doesn't
Let's
mean,
correct
it doesn't mean it isn't dumb and it shouldn't have been taken out years ago. And I said, again, my bad, I didn't notice it.
No, so let's look at taking that out, unless the planning board has, I mean, I think there was the idea of the motel effect.
I know what the idea is, and it's freaking suburban, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we didn't, I don't recall it coming up with the planning board when we were discussing it. We didn't really, that didn't come up, but it says only one main entrance will be permitted on the front or street side of the building. That's the language. All other entrances shall be located at the side or rear of the building. And that the building official is the one that determines, well, in regards to building code, but again, some of these, a lot of these are by right, so in determining that, it would be the building official.
Thank you, Allison. The public have any comments on the proposed changes? Just have you state your name for the record.
That's a bad start. George Davis, 400 Seaweed Lane. First, I do want to thank the planning board, Allison and Jennifer, for all the work they've done, and I'm sure there's others, to craft these new amendments. To read them, it's very tough to go through initially, and I think it's much easier now than it was, and taking out a lot of the strange language is very helpful. As I wrote to the planning board in September, though, there is one change that affects me directly, or potentially affects me directly, that I do have an issue with, and that is, it's now under D, accessory dwelling units by special use permit, and that's DF. My lot happens to be a little less than 60,000 square feet in area, so this is what would affect me if I were to consider building a 513. 1% increase in my case, because I'm already at my maximum coverage, it's only a 500 or something square foot dwelling anyway. But it's the owner shall execute and record against the deed to said property a restriction that in exchange for the bonus, the accessory dwelling unit created remains part of the island's attainable year-round housing stock in perpetuity. In perpetuity. I don't think I would do anything with that sort of restriction. I won't live forever, but in perpetuity is an awfully long time. I would like you to consider changing that. I think that the current restrictions, if enforced, are fully sufficient for someone that takes on the expense of building a 513. It is not a money-making situation when you're going to be using it for employee housing. In fact, it's very much the opposite. So this additional restriction, though I understand it's designed to minimize abuses, which we all are aware of, and make it something that exists forever. I understand the need for that, but that kind of restriction and that kind of deed, I think, is just too much and should really be stricken, and use the laws and rules that you already have and enforce them. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Go ahead.
Jen or Allison or anybody from the planning board, can you help me? That's the language I was talking about before. What does it mean to remain part of the island's attainable year-round housing stock in perpetuity? Like, is that?
It means you can't remove the 513 from the property. You have to, the other part of the 513, it gives you an abandonment
Clause. Right.
This would,
Jen, can you step up to the microphone for the public?
So the 513, This
you
is
state
for the
your name?
1% bonus. This is specific to the 1% bonus.
Chris, could I have your name for the record?
Christopher Willie, thank you. So this was, in consideration of this, you have to look at the unintended consequences. Say Mr. Davis sells his property, they abandon the 513 use and turn it into an Airbnb. The whole point of the 1% bonus, allowing a bonus in coverage, was specifically for 513. If they get the bonus and then they abandon it without any type of, it's a loophole. So if perpetuity isn't the word you want to use, set 99 years, set 20 years, set 50 years. But you got to understand the unintended consequence with a lot of these that we've considered is, what if they are abandoned on the sale of the property? What's going to happen to the 513? So,
And I guess my question, and I agree with you 100%, and you and I agree on unintended consequences. Here, I worry that the intention of the bump up of lot coverage, the 1%, will get, I mean, this sort of cuts the knees out a little bit, unless we change the date. I mean, like you say, 25 years. I just think it, for whether it's 500 square feet or 1,200 square feet, in theory, it's a lot of restrictions for a lot of costs. So I'm not saying don't do it. I just think it will have relatively little impact because of the.
well, you also,
The
I'm
cost.
just giving you what was discussed at the table.
Yeah.
Why, how this was, how.
Oh,
we
I
came
can
up
see
with
how
this.
it happened.
Right.
But I'm just worried that, I like the idea of the bump
So
up.
there
I
were-
like the idea of small lots. I like the
Right.
idea of trying to do this. I worry that this has eliminated that benefit because nobody's going to do, or very few people will do that. That's why Thanks.
Okay, I'm missing something. We want to keep this in perpetuity, which is basically a lien forever on the property. Why don't you just have it, can't you just have it cease to exist? I mean, you just
What do you mean,
can't
the
have it. You
513?
can't have the 513 as a 513 unless it meets these standards.
Right,
If you
but-
say it's in perpetuity, what else will you ever be able to, if it is in perpetuity, there's nothing else you could ever do with that space.
You could do a B&B without.
Well, but in essence, you've got the building, right? So I'm arguing against myself.
No,
You've got the building, you've got the new brick and mortar. You can't pull that off the property.
No, Mark, I think, answered the question, sort of. But I don't know how you can make it in perpetuity and never be able to be just regular part, it would have to be absorbed by the other house somehow. As a guest house or something. Thank you, Keith. That's the only thing I'm saying.
Thank you, Martha Gale.
Hi, Gail Hall, for the record. With my planning board hat on, I was an advocate for in perpetuity or for the restriction to run with the land because the unintended consequence is that someone may want to sell their property over time or need to. And what's inherent with island living is this housing problem. And if we make that one, if we're giving an exception to be able to build more than what you could ordinarily build and use it to help affordable housing, then let's keep that as affordable housing and have that run with the land forever so that in 30 years, when this affordable housing issue is still in a reality, as it will be, it'll be there. Because none of us are going to live forever. As much as we'd like to. But I hope that we do seriously consider it because I think if we're granting an exception this grand, and I think neighbors should be able to weigh in when anyone is able to give or get more than what would ordinarily be allowed in the zoning ordinance.
Gail, can you stay there wearing another hat as a Realtor? What are the impacts for the real estate business if you're telling people that you're mandated now to keep it as an affordable unit?
Well, having lived here as long as almost all the realtors have. I mean, most are advocates for, I think, if not all, are advocates for year-round housing. And so to us, it's relatively easy to explain to someone buying property that here's your advantage. You can rent this to someone living here year-round. You can keep the family or person that is there and/or select who you'd like to be there as a caretaker, a caregiver, whoever, whatever your needs may be, but it does run with the land. And so it's not going to stop a sale. It might change some people's idea of whether that's what they want to buy, but it will work for some.
Could
If
you,
not
u-
more than
could you use a summer house rental as an example? There's some people who will stay in a different part of the house or over the garage and rent the main house. Is that a deterrent to renting the house for people who come out here in the summer? If the owner is on
No.
premises?
No, and often in cases you get better tenants because they knew the owners were on the property. But one thing that you brought up a point, I'm glad you said that, because you brought up a point about, Airbnb is very popular now. And my concern with the turnover when someone does sell their property is that it's a great idea that already exists. We can Airbnb this and make a lot of money. So and anyone would want to do that. If the building's already there, you don't have to change it. You may just decide I can make a heck of a lot more money on my Airbnb than renting to someone here year-round. Thank you.
Thank you, Gail. David Lewis?
David Lewis for the record. So, it gets back to the bugaboo that nobody likes to talk about, which is enforcement. My understanding is that if somebody's gonna rent that as an Airbnb, that's a violation of the 513 authorization. Are we going to enforce these rules, or are we not going to enforce these rules?
Thank you, David. Any more public comment? Kristen Bauman? Margie, I'll let you up next.
I'm Kristen Bauman. My pronouns are she and her, for the record. I have a lived experience with 513s. I took an existing structure on my property that was a shed and created a 513. And I didn't look that up before I came, and I left my phone at home. But I think that's 11 years, if anybody knows that off the top of their head, Jen Brady. Could be longer, so maybe 12 years. So so I've been thinking about 513s for 12 years. It's a long time, right? And so as much as I appreciate everybody who did work in this room, I'd also like you to consider a change that I did request people to think about. So I'm wondering what the cons were, and obviously now you've put two and two together. In full disclosure, the pro is that I would be able to continue to live on Block Island. So I request the conversation and pros and cons and unintended and intended consequences about accessory structures being ownable and lots being able to be divided. So, and that would be like a condo situation, right? And so then you have provided housing for people. I know of, when I speak of this publicly, my phone at home that's being charged is lighting up right now with people saying, yes, that's me, that's me, that's me. I know they're out there in the community. They've responded to this plea before. So again, the pro and the intention of this meeting to provide housing would be fairly immediate. And then, as you hear whatever the con is or the unintended consequences, I request that you consider maybe a short-term plan about this. Maybe this is a change in the ordinance that could sunset. I don't know zoning. I don't know if that's like the worst thing in the world to say, sunset clauses, or this expires in 2 years, or let's give this a shot. But as we continue to talk about housing on this island, I think we have to give everything a shot. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirsten. Margie?
Margie Cummings for the record. I wanted just to present one other side. This has been my mantra right along. We have to look at all sides of the issue for housing, and that includes all of the neighbors in the surrounding neighborhood. So we've been very sensitive to that when we've been working on crafting and easing up the restrictions to make sure that we have protected the character of the neighborhood along with the neighborhood, so that when we have increased housing, we do not implode the neighborhood with extra people, extra cars, extra noise, et cetera, because people bought their houses feeling that they would be in an area where it would be quiet, it would have a nice vista, it would have a chance to do things on their own property without somebody looking over their shoulder. So there are two sides to the story. We certainly want to provide more housing, and you can see from what we've crafted, we've definitely been able to do that. But we've also balanced by saying we need to look at the neighborhood, and so we've tried to keep them under a certain amount, limiting the number that will be allowed on a property so that the neighborhood character does not change. So just to play devil's advocate, which I've been doing right along, be sure that we look at both sides of the question. Thank you.
Thank you, Margie. Any more public comment? Go ahead.
So I know Kristen, I'm not going to let this go. So I know Kristen's raised this. Can somebody from the planning board, did you guys discuss this idea about the owner moving into the 513 and renting out their house, which is, I think, basically what you're saying? Or renting out the quote-unquote residence?
Well, no, I actually speak to dividing the property and both having ownership. This ordinance specifically states individual ownership.
Yes.
And so I advocate for the ability to both be ownership. So a couple things that when you come and speak at the mic, you forget. But what Margie just reminded me, right? Like, this is talking about already existing 513s, right? So that impact doesn't change. And it speaks to this idea that we lose them when properties sell, right? We still have wording and language in the ordinance where you can abandon your 513, right? And that happens. And so this preserves them, possibly, by saying you own it and you own it, right? Like one piece of property, you own it. So it's, I have a lived experience. I definitely have, whatever it is, a dog in this race here. But of course, so do all of you, as I do a pretty good job. So it's this idea that my property is not big enough to condoize or subdivide, and you can't condoize 513s. They're accessory by their title, by nature, right? They're accessory. You can only have one owner of that property. And I advocate having two owners, right? A 513, if you want it to be affordable, goes into the stock, right? It allows, right? We just built 6 affordable units at Cherry Lane. I think it was 6. There could be 6 of these right now, tonight, if you okay this. 6 513s that their tenant wants to buy. The owner gets that money. It's all secure. The 513 stays a 513. The owner, has this. What also could happen is the owner could be aging and you could get more affordable housing, because by breaking off the 513, the main house has less on the market, right? Less bedrooms, less rental possibility, less ideas about it being an Airbnb, right? Now you've, potentially created even more attainable workforce housing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. Thanks, Fen. 2 issues before us, the doors and perpetuity. Does the council want to change any of that before I close the public hearing?
I actually learned a lot about the perpetuity. I understand it. I think it'll potentially impact some of the folks who may be considering it. But let's see how it goes. I mean, and if we don't have anybody looking for the 1% bump up, maybe reevaluate it down the road. But let's see where it goes for now on that issue.
Thank you. Last call for public comment. Kevin Hoyt.
My name's Kevin Hoyt, for the record. Just as I would agree with George to some extent about the in perpetuity. there should be a way that is equitable for both the municipality, the community, and the property owner to be able to back out of that. I'm not sure what the best way of that is, but I mean, there are a lot of decks that occupy 1% of lot coverage, you know, so if you wanna, yes, you can remove the building. You can pick it up to what has been done in the past. You can pick it up and move it to another property. You know, forcing someone to be into a situation in perpetuity, and I wonder if that's the legality of that. That's a question for the solicitor. But I think you'd have to give them a way out somehow to do that. But that means that there has to be some. I'm not a big fan of getting a bonus. I like the word increase, like that's earlier in the language of that paragraph, the word increase is used, and then we swift over to bonus. I think that that's just semantics, but it probably would be better to use the word increase throughout that paragraph rather than bonus. But there should be a way that is equitable, to Margie's point, and to maintain character of the neighborhood. If they're going to back out and abandon the 513, that they somehow reconcile that 1%. Maybe that means going back to zoning and making sure that, you know, there is a decision on record that says that this 513 has been abandoned and that they don't have the right to use it as an Airbnb. I know West Warwick, I believe, is working on zoning amendments to deal with Airbnb. So I don't think it needs to be a big lift, but I think that a heavy lift, but I think that there is some concern about putting stuff in perpetuity and not giving people a way out. People need to have options, and that's why I get concerned about the legality of it. So, especially for an owner who is to, you know, if the property transfers. So, there's got to be a pathway with simple language to be able to provide a way to abandon. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin.
I guess, Andre, with only one month of me remaining at this table, my main concern is what George and what David brought up, and it seems to always be the enforcement component. Martha usually brings up history, but I'll bring up history from 30 years ago when accessory apartments were being so abused. And at the Beacon Hill property, one of the provisions was a prohibition of accessory units in those 7 homes. So this issue, whether, yes, it's been perennial, but it also evolves too. So what I'll ask is the next group really pay attention to the enforcement component of it, because I've witnessed so much of the abuses over the last decade or so.
Thanks, Mark. Kim Gavitt?
Kim Gaffett. I just wonder if we could get the planning board or Allison to address what Kristen brought up, because I'd really like to know what the arguments were against being able to have ownership of the 513. If somebody's in a situation, they create a 513 and they want to sell it so that that person can own it with all those restrictions, it seems, I'd like to understand why that's not an option, because I think a lot of times money is a problem, and if a person could own it, they could put some of their own resources into it, and they could maybe get a mortgage to help build it and create it. You know, I could think of a situation where, you know, as an owner, I might want to have the property and everything and want to do it, but can't afford to do it, and I may have a potential person who would fit, but they can't go out and get a mortgage for something they don't own. So I'd really like to hear the discussion about why that was negated, and if there are other ways of getting around that. So thank you.
Thank you, Kim. Allison, can you offer insight into that question? She's still on mute.
Yeah, no, I'm here. I know Kristen attended planning board meeting or several. It was a while back. I don't recall us discussing it in detail. There didn't seem to be much appetite, I think, to consider that. I think the main purpose when this was crafted, is to create a form of, rental housing. So, without that, and that's a way of kind of controlling costs and providing for an affordable or attainable housing need of rentals and a lower cost. I guess we'd have to think it through a little bit more. As far as, is it just for those existing or is it going forward? And what's to stop like many people from pursuing that and really selling at a high cost, quite a number of units. There's no control of cost there, except that it's maybe on a smaller piece of land, and that would make it less expensive. But again, the planning board we didn't discuss it. So I don't know if any planning board members, anyone else wants to weigh in. So I don't want to really speak to what the planning board's feelings were on it, but it wasn't something that really anyone wanted to consider at that point. Like that was probably last year. We haven't discussed it recently.
Thank you, Allison. Does anybody from the planning board want to tackle that? Go ahead,
Jump
Ken.
in as a former member of the planning board.
Go ahead. Oh, go ahead.
Kevin Hoyt again. We have an ordinance. We have an ordinance to do this. It's 405. We could make a commitment to tailor that to, because what we're doing is essentially creating small houses, and they don't, and we have to start delving into the actual essence of 80% to talk about affordability. We'd have to talk about median income, and that's a place for when we start talking about dividing ownership of lots up. I think that we already have an ordinance for that, and we could absolutely jump in and tailor that so that if two people from the island could get together and afford to develop that and have split ownership, I think we already have the ability to do that. So we just have to put in the 405 ordinance, and that's something that I just spoke with Jen that she agrees with.
We already have an example, Josie, property, they subdivided it, but they could have conquered it.
Okay, what about, I just wanted to ask a question. This goes along with what you're talking about, Kevin. Is there still the capacity to do what Fred Leader and the Abbots did on Beacon Hill?
Yes, it's a different section.
That, so that allowed the two houses on the one parcel. That's what I think that was tying in what you were talking about, Kevin.
And it's happened actually behind my mother's house on High Street. Troy and Maureen Reynolds did it when they were still together.
Yeah, that was as a, what was that as? It wasn't
It
the,
was the previous version of 405.
Yeah.
Before 405 was amended. But so there's ways of doing what Kristen is aimed at and what Kim talked about. It's probably not in an accessory dwelling unit, small scale, because no one's going to want to have a 2-bedroom house. If you want to live on Block Island and have a family, you're going to want to have 3 bedrooms or 4 bedrooms so you can have children and your family can grow. So it's not that we're prohibiting it here. It's just it lies in a different ordinance or different section of the ordinance.
This is really geared toward rental for year-round people. It is not geared toward ownership at this particular time. We could work on that and look at something at a later time, but this is geared toward year-round rentals for residents who are here on the island.
Just quickly, I agree with what Margie just added, but important message for everyone is we didn't dismiss the topic. It is the fact that it's ownership versus rental, and we're trying to get some things to go through so at least to increase the benefit of the ordinance. And also, one topic that I had brought up, we need to talk about further possibly, but there were unintended consequences that we have to digest, is having the owner be their own 513. And that's something Kristen had come up to the board with originally, and another new property owner has approached us with the idea. Something we still have to think about. But as you know, you only have so much time in every meeting, and there's all sorts of unintended consequences with every topic. So nothing is dismissed by the board. We're just doing trying to keep things moving.
And if I can, that was why I brought it up, because I thought that's actually where she was going, or Kristen was going, was move into the 513 as a year-round resident and do that. And I think that is it's something that should just continue to be explored, but there are big-time unintended consequences. So how do you bucket for that? And maybe maybe those consequences, don't make it viable, but as long as we pushed against them. And as David already pointed out, enforcement's an issue. So enforcement, when we know there are unintended consequences, just creates problems.
And this may just be semantics, but you can't have an accessory use
That's right.
on its own lot.
That's right.
Thank you, Martha. Thank you, everybody. Is there any more public comment on the topic? Is the council happy with the way it's written? Last chance, public comment? Thank you all. Make a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Seconded by Sven. All those in favor? Keith? And Martha? Aye. I'm in favor. And Sven? Mark?
Aye. Thanks, George.
Public hearing is closed. I'll entertain a motion on the ordinance. Anybody's got one?
Move it be adopted as presented.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion on the council? Public? All those in favor, Keith? Yes. Mark?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
I'm in favor. Sven?
Aye, and thanks to all.
Motion will carry. Thank you all. Thank you for all the hard work you put into this.
Thanks to the planning board. And thank you, Jen. Thank you, Allison.
This is going to make a big difference, so I'm very pleased. So thank you very much.
Let's hope.
Yep. Thank you. Next item on the agenda, number 4, discuss and act on potential ferry speed restrictions. Apparently, there's a proposal out there to reduce the speed of vessels for certain times of the year.
Talk, you could go outside, please. Sosha, everybody.
I wish I had that rule. I wish they'd tell me. Why don't you tell me that?
You can stay, Andre, you just can't talk.
That would make it palatable for everybody else. We have before us tonight a proposal that changes the North Atlantic right whale vessel speed regulations to further reduce the likelihood of mortalities and serious injuries to endangered right whales from vessel collisions. Essentially, that's it in a nutshell. How did this end up on our agenda?
You weren't here.
I know. How did this?
So we had a meeting with Interstate. This is a new proposal from NOAA to expand the area that is an area of under regulation for right whales, and that reduces the size of vessels, which doesn't apply to the ferry, but it reduces the size of the vessels that would be subject to the speed limitations in the regulated area. The ferry company raised it as a concern because if this were to go through, it would result in a requirement to reduce the speed of the ferry, both the high speed and the traditional. I think Sven, asked them to send us the information on it, and I think what we got is what's in our packet. I don't know what Interstate was asking us to do. For me, I think since there are a number of ferry companies up and down the coast, if you look at the map, the impacted zone is significantly larger. I think it would be helpful to see what other municipalities have done in terms of resolution. I mean, we don't really have anything before us other than the information that Interstate brought to us, and I'm happy to look at it. The ferry said that they haven't seen that none of the captains have ever even seen a right whale. But I don't know that we have anything before us, Andre, for action.
Excuse me, Andre, I could provide a little bit of background if you need it.
James Callahan.
How are you?
Nice to hear your voice. I can't see you because you're behind me.
Yes,
Thank you for being here.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Yeah, this was brought to us from Interstate. Basically, this would reduce the ferry speed to 10 knots, which is about 11.5 miles per hour. That would make the regular ferry at least a 1.5 hour trip. And that would be from November 1st to May 30th, all the time. And also there's a proposal from NOAA that in the event a right whale is seen, it would create what's called a dynamic zone, I think, which would slow down the ferries to that speed for at least some period of time after a sighting of a right whale. This proposal is meant to reduce the likelihood of right whale mortalities and reduce vessel strikes of vessels 35 feet or longer. So I think that applies to all of the ferries to Block Island. It stretches from Georgia up above Boston. So I think Keith's point about what other towns are doing is important. But for us, the comment period ends on October 30th of this month. So Interstate was recommending that we file a letter or a comment in opposition of the proposal to make sure that Block Island gets a voice in this situation. And they provided a draft or some comments that we could incorporate into a letter that I would say, if you do want to approve, that would come from Andre as council president, or first warden, or from Mary Ann as town manager, but we'd need some authority from the council for that if you do see fit to approve something like that.
Thank you, James. Bill, I see you're out there today. So this would reduce the speed of the ferries to 10 knots or 10 miles an hour, 10 knots. 10 knots. All right, so.
Andre, if I can,
Please.
There's a lot of opposition, obviously, from up and down the coast, from ferry operators, steamship and so forth. It certainly would increase our trip to probably, we think, at least an hour and a half. We're going to be doing a trial run next week at that speed. So we have an exact number so we can incorporate that in with, our opposition to the proposal. As Callahan said, the comment period is the end of this month, the 31st. NOAA works under the Commerce Department. We're hoping that, our former governor also sees this and understands the impact to it. But certainly from November on, we'd be looking at that, that long ride there. Our opposition really is based on the fact that, like we said, as was said earlier, those whales hadn't been seen in this area. So we're asking for the support of the town council also, just like Davini did and the communities up and down the coast that are affected by that.
Thank you, Bill. I'd really like to know the number. I'm calculating knots to nautical miles by 13 nautical miles, and 13 nautical miles, according to my not nautical mile calculator here, is 1 hour and 10 minutes. 13 nautical miles at 10 knots would be 1 hour and 10 minutes.
Is it 15 or 16? To the harbor. Yeah.
Harbor to harbor. Okay.
So as you come out, you're restricted to certain times anyway, because there's a leave in the harbor. So we believe, based on our captains that travel all the time, it's going to be at least an hour and a half. Whether it's more, less, right now we know it's approximately, say, 55 minutes. So.
Go ahead, Sven.
James, a question. If one were to write a letter, is that a letter in opposition, or is it a letter to request more information?
Well, the information is here. There's
Well, I know,
But there's slides and
No, I get it.
there's a whole other thing. So we actually have the information. It's just a link.
Well, I know, I've read it, but I'm asking James, is it a request for objection, or is it a request for further discussion and a voice?
The request that we received from Interstate was that we, or the town, send an opposition letter to the proposed rule. But you could do whatever you feel is the right thing to do in this situation.
Could we write a letter that would have any weight, James, to ask for a voice? Or as Mark just said, a seat at the table?
We have to make a decision on here tonight whether we're going to oppose this or not. Having a voice at the seat of the table is not part of public comment. They're taking public comment. That's how I understand how these things operate.
Can I just say one thing, because I don't want this to come back to bite us. We did have a right whale off the East Beach this past June.
Right.
And it was on the front page of the Block Island Times, so we can't pretend it didn't happen.
I see somebody standing at the podium who may have a comment.
I just want clarification. I was listening to what Mr. Callahan said. Was it 35 feet and up?
Correct.
So do you know the absurdity of this proposal? 35 feet and up. That is a killer for the entire Point Judith fishing fleet. Never mind the interstate. Like, who's exempt for this? Are recreational vessels exempt for this?
I don't know.
Categories of exemptions, if I recall what I read correctly, and it's largely police,
Government.
emergency type.
But this is what I'm kind of getting at. This proposal was first hatched back when the wind farm was going up. Okay? Now there's just more of these wind farms going up and down the East Coast. So understandably, there's concern, but in those zones, I get. But 35 feet and up is crippling. Never mind a commercial, but I mean, it's crippling. Like, just wrap your head around it. Even if it is from November 1 to May 1st, it's a bit absurd, and I'm kind of disappointed that NOAA would go about. Usually, there's a little bit of notice on what they want to do and some feedback, but as I understand it, is this the feedback time? Like, you want a seat at the table? Sounds like this is too late. It's like yes or no, because.
Well, they did have the meetings in August.
Yeah.
This is the first
I mean, it's
time.
like look at it. It's absurd.
It's 35 to 65 feet.
It's absurd.
That doesn't- but
I don't
okay,
care. I mean, I don't care. Like,
It doesn't make any- that doesn't make any sense either.
shipping lanes, I could understand, but like from Point Judith to Block Island, Point Judith to New Harbor, like, it's just absurd. It's absurd. I get it, but 35 feet and up at 10 knots is ridiculous. Like, the economic impact just with the fishing fleet, never mind ferry services, would be staggering.
But take a look at the Island Institute's website, because it includes a lot of the lobster boats in Maine.
Right.
Pretty-
So this doesn't seem like it was, at first blush, this sounds like it's a political stunt, not a well thought out scientific proposal.
So, I mean, I really struggle with this one, I gotta be honest with you, but I don't think, but I do think that they've, when you read the stuff, there's a lot of science behind it. It's just, sort of struggle with your relative values, right?
Well, to Martha's point, there was a right whale off the beach. When was it up, Martha?
June 6th.
June. And when's his proposal for?
Um,
So what?
Well, that proposal is for, I think James said it, it was if any. Right, but if,
Unless there's a sighting, and then what happens?
well, that's it, this kicks in. If this is, as far as I know, this kicks in if there's a sighting.
And then read what the site, what happens when that happens.
It's the same thing as this kicking in.
It's a whole different level.
To speak to the science in the slides, there's 368 right whales left, 53 documented dead or serious injuries, 34 dead, unknown causes, 11 vessel strikes, 9 entanglements, 1 perennial mortalities, and this is what the data that they have, 19 serious injuries, 17 entanglements, and 2 vessel strikes. 1/3 of the right whale deaths are documented, 57 new calves only since 2017. So I think I feel the same as what Keith is saying. It's kind of like, what are your principles here?
Okay, but this is what I don't understand. How does it make a difference how is a vessel that's only going 10 knots not going to hurt a whale?
I was
I
confused by
don't
that as
understand.
well.
I also don't understand what we have in front of us says, most vessels greater than or equal to 35 feet and less than 65 feet in length. What the heck does that mean?
I think it already applies to vessels over 65. That's the size that, I'm pretty sure that's how
Oh,
it works.
I have no idea. I was just reading what I had.
But I mean, I don't know why they didn't, for example, require watch standards or so. Like it's an odd approach that is challenging philosophically.
There's also emerging technologies. I mean, there was an article that came out on the 17th that smart buoys are being deployed in Chile to let everybody know there's whales in the area. I don't think this takes into consideration any of those emerging technologies. What do we want to do? David. And then Bill.
I'm surprised that nobody brought this up yet. I was at the meeting, the Saturday meeting, or Thursday, when we talked, I don't know what day it is. The 12:30 meeting that Interstate was at a couple of weeks ago, and one of the points that I guess it was their accountant or their attorney, Gallery, made was the impact of if there were a sighting during the season that the high-speed boat is running, it would literally, my understanding of what he said is that if there were a sighting, then a whole set of exception rules would kick into place, that for some period of time, he didn't know that he didn't cite that period of time at that meeting, but the concern is if that were to go into place for a period of time, at 10 miles an hour, it effectively would spend the end of the high-speed service for that period of time. Because the high speeds, well, presumably can't go less than 10 knots without defeating their own purpose. The further point to be made, and I'm ready for anyone to correct me if I'm misstating what I heard that day, is that most of us know that the high-speed ferry subsidizes greatly 12 to 2,000 ferry without the high speed, our rates on everything would be a lot higher for the service we expect them to deliver today compared to even a decade ago. So if the revenue from the high speed is diminished because of an exception rule, that's a direct translation on everything else we think about on Rock Island as well that is dependent on ferry rates. So I think that needs to be part of your concern and consideration, and maybe somebody besides me can add some additional clarity to Interstate's position on that. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Bill McComb?
I think the other thing too is that the position is that they're casting this wide net, and it's not that you don't care about the whales, but the position is that this protection area has been very broad. There hasn't been Steamship Authority has in other areas. So it isn't a matter of, of not believing that the iceberg is more important than Wales. It has to do with how big of a protection area that they're trying to put out, and is that net necessary in order to achieve what they want to do? And on the second poll, how does it affect the lifeline and the commerce aspect of what we're talking about? Take that net comment back. Going back a little bit, Andre, if I can, Keith's comment about what are other communities, other municipalities doing, I think that would be a very good benchmark to learn. I understand the timing and understand where we are, but the environment, whether it's birds, whether it's land, whether it's fish or fisheries, are pretty important to Block Island. And I understand the commercial aspects that everybody's talking about, and Chris is exactly right. From a commercial point of view, it's pretty bonkers. From a ferry point of view, it could be wrong. But at what point do you draw a line, and when does it become about environment versus people? And so I guess I'd like to see what other communities are doing before we make a clear stand. I don't know where this discussion ends other than, do exactly what we want regardless of. And so I'd love to hear from other communities first.
Council, how do you feel?
Are these the ones that go from the Cape to Georgia?
Yes. And back.
Yes, Sven. And back. They all end up, they never return from Georgia because I'm not even going to go there. Down south.
Hey, James, we're not on any egg timer for this issue, are we?
October 31st.
Well, with that knowledge, I'm prepared to make a decision.
Hold on, Bill. Kim Gavin?
I just don't want to end the evening without at least one person from the audience saying, what? Who are we?
Exactly.
Environmental conservation place, and we're gonna slow ourselves down for 15 minutes and say goodbye to the last little right whales? I mean, I understand there's all kinds of economics here and interstate, doing, could you help us with this? But get some more information, including, whether or not these standards, talk to some biologists, find out if they really think these standards are useful. Don't make a decision based on a few minutes' time after what we've stood for the last 50-plus years.
Thanks, Kim.
Couldn't let it not be said.
I don't see you on the.
I introduced
Oh, forget it.
I introduced it for you, Kim.
Bill?
As far as the comment period, there is a time limit when we have to the end of the month. There is a bunch of information that's available. That's when we met with you. We told you about that. We got in touch. Our attorney spoke with your attorney to provide you all that information. So I think I know Keith, you've looked at some, so you said. So it is available to you. If you Google it, you'll see what all towns, from the Cape on down, position they take on also. So, thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Kim, thank you for your comments. I mean, it's what I'm sitting here thinking, but what do we want to do? Continue?
I mean, I think my discomfort theoretically might be resolved with additional information about what perhaps doing more reading myself. So I would rather not take action tonight on something.
Okay. Millie, meeting scheduled before 10:31? Could you?
You have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow.
If we need to have a meeting before the 31st to have comment on this, and if the council would like to, as a group, have a meeting to comment on this, I'd be more than happy to do so. Good?
Good?
Thank you all. Item number 5 is a review of financial reports. I see Amy's in the room this evening, so without further ado, I'll.
So what was there? Was there any action taken or no action?
Council wants to, few of the council wants to get more information, and if we want to comment on it, we'll have a meeting before the 30th. You're welcome. Without further ado, Amy, if you want to step into that. Amy, I have one question for you before you get going.
Yes.
Thank you for
You want
that.
to start there?
No, I'm just wondering why land trust sewer water is excluded from the debt service chart.
Well, I was asked to update a particular chart, and this is the one. So I tried to keep it apples to apples, but also this was really in the context of the general fund financial statements.
Okay.
And so this is going to be debt service that's supported through the tax base explicitly. Sewer and water are paid for primarily by the ratepayers. Land trust is paid for through their own funds.
Thank you. Continue.
Okay. Can we get back to that at the end, though? 'Cause
Sure.
there's
However
some
you-
more I want to share on that one.
However you want to start, go ahead.
Well, and that's really the big point. I don't know if this made it on clerk base, but it is an updated debt service schedule, and we see this pretty often. But it's just the most current version. But what's important is that what's not on the page, and that's authorized but unissued debt. And today that includes $8 million of borrowing related to broadband and $10.4 million that was authorized related to school construction. So the total outstanding principal that's reflected in this debt service schedule is $8.1 million, $18.1 million. And so when you're looking at that unissued debt, you're essentially looking at double the amount of principal spread over a different time period, but it's not insignificant. So that's the one thing I would add to that context.
Thank you.
Sure. And that was at the request of one of the council members the last time we met. Sure.
Council wanted to go through the whole financial report, or does anybody have any particular questions, comments?
Highlights from.
Highlights?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's month.
So Sven gets all the credit for that. I just put it on the page. But
But you have the talent to actually do that. Thank you.
in terms of highlights, lowlights, it's actually a fairly dry set of financials for the end of September. If you're looking at the summary page, you can see revenues, 44% of budget, exactly where we were, 44% of budgeted revenues at this time last year. Looking at expenditures, 20% of budget year to date, exactly where we were at the end of September of last year. And looking at revenues over expenditures, very close, less than $100,000 difference between the two. So in terms of consistency year over year, we're right where we were last year. There's nothing particular that I would call your attention to in terms of flipping the pages. If there's one thing I'm keeping an eye on, it's actually lines that are underspent at this point and making sure that we are moving through some of those projects at a pace that will get them completed this year, or that we have a clear plan for how they're going to move through next year. And I think we'll have a lot more clarity on that as we go through the capital planning process. So I'm happy to take questions.
No, I didn't see any real anomalies, that's why.
Any questions from the council?
The thing that keeps me awake is actually on the debt, the GEO debt service and the unissued broadband and school construction bonds in the current interest rate environment. What are you seeing? What are the bankers telling you, et cetera? And what's the impact? In other words, does it make sense to do the issuance of broadband as quickly as possible because, you know, the interest rate environment actually might deteriorate over the next several months. Or, like, I'm just.
Right, and there's
I
actually,
have no great idea here. It just is something that I think about pretty regularly.
and there's not necessarily a lot of consensus on what the right answer is today. Particularly when you're looking at broadband, one of the things that we're, I don't want to say waiting on, but working through is a process that ensures that those issuances are tax exempt. And so we're in that trade-off period of, if you do it today, they'll be taxable, versus working through the tax exempt process and what that spread looks like. And so our inclination is still to continue to pursue that path. School construction, if you asked me to bring that to market today, I'd be really hesitant. I think there's still a lot that we're working through on that project, and so I don't think that we're ready, regardless of the environment. And yes, we're not going to be back down where we were 2 years ago, but such is life. We've been in this space before. That's the best I can offer today.
That's totally fair.
Yeah. I'm glad that we did the issuance in August of '21. That certainly did turn out to be fortuitous. But
Thank you.
Sure.
And I think we normally have every year in the warrant an item about refunding bonds.
Yeah.
If we did, because if we get a lower rate, we're obviously never going to do anything with that. But if the rates were higher and things did come down, then.
You would
we
take
do-
advantage, and
yeah.
ultimately, over the last
You've done a lot of that, haven't you?
8 years, we've refunded almost everything that was previously outstanding. So we took care of all of that. The other thing we did in recent history is we did a lot of 10-year issuances.
Yep.
So we really accelerated that debt service. You can see that in the chart. And so as you have a higher interest rate, you tend to start to go back to a longer maturity as well. It's got its trade-offs, but being able to front load some of those while we could and interest rates were low, hopefully will serve us well over the long term.
Thank you.
Question?
Any other comments from the council? Public? Financial report?
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Next item on the agenda is number 6, to receive and act on the report of the town manager, Public Works, Finance, Schools, School Construction Project, Library, Recreation, Administration, Harbors, Broadband, Police, and Roads. Marianne?
So the council has my report before you this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions or comments that they may have regarding the town manager's report.
Only one thing I want to bring to your attention, Mary Ann, is I did some wandering at the request of someone on Block Island to go look at Gracie's Cove, and that is quite a mess down there at the end of it. Are we on top of a game plan for that?
Unfortunately, we applied for DEM grants 2 years in a row for Gracie's Cove. Unfortunately, we didn't get those, so now we need to look at it probably through the capital project process.
Just have one question, or one, at some point, maybe at our next meeting, developing some sense of the Department of Public Works position and what the process is going to be for that.
I was hoping to get through the police chiefs, and then that's the next step.
That's why I said
Yeah.
it's not a tonight issue.
Can you give us a quick update on the police chief search?
As stated in the report, we did have 3 finalists, and we scheduled island visits and interviews with the 3 finalists, which took place today. Next step will be reconvening of the committee, which will take place probably early next week, I think.
So when do you think you might be able to have somebody before the town council?
What I would do is, once we come up with the final candidate, I would have a psychological completed, and I will not bring the person to the council until that psychological is completed, because that's also required for the post.
Do you have any idea when you'll be bringing a candidate to the town council?
So what we did was we reached out already to the individual that we've used before for the psychological, and I can't remember if it's a he or she because Charlene took care of it. They're looking at a 2-week window, so it looks like it'll be sometime in November at this point. We had to cancel the interviews with the weather and stuff like that, so it's been a little longer than we originally anticipated.
Thank you. Anybody else have any?
Only one, at the next meeting, can you sort of give us that update on Thomas? I mean, I know you've got costs in here, and it says all that, and the facilities director and all, but I'm just thinking about timing and where it's going, and once those costs come in, how everything is moving on that housing front. Thank you.
Any other questions, comments?
I noticed you had roads in here or other areas. Anything else to, I guess, add?
No, at this point, no.
Okay. Thanks.
Just have a comment, just technology improvements. I know we're moving on with technology improvements, but I don't think the technology in this room is complete yet, because we were,
So, stuff is supply chain issues, so we're waiting for that to.
iPads and whatnot, so we can see what's behind us and better audio for the public.
Yeah, Tom, you want to talk about that briefly, because you're on top of that more?
Hi, Tom Reesum, Facility Manager. There are two aspects of the audiovisual improvements here that haven't been completed yet. One is a USB extension. It's a device about this big that's 3 months in the making. They thought we would have it every month up to now, but now they've said November, first week in November is, I think, the current. And that will put the table back over here. It'll bring everything through a jack at Mark's feet and enable the camera then to see you or them a little bit more the way it was intended to be. The second one was an audiovisual display, not an iPad, but just a repeater of what's on there to a monitor in front of you. It was brought to me that you didn't need a full computer like you have right there, but it was just so you didn't have to turn around to see what was behind you. If we want to address an actual computer, then that would change the parameters.
No, it was just so that the council could actually
Right, so
see who's speaking.
we have an
behind them.
audiovisual switch that will have the same input that went to just that TV. It will go to the switch now and then spread out to a monitor on each of the stations and the big screen.
Thank you. Appreciate that. David Lewis?
Last spring, I recommended, when this discussion was being held about this room, how useful it would be to have portable microphones so that the audience could have engaged back and forth with the council or 2 or 3 members of the audience in a more dynamic conversation rather than having to fight their way to a single microphone. So is that still going to happen? And if not, I would merely suggest witness tonight how difficult it was to have a conversation between the podium, Bill, and Jen, and one other person in the audience. I can't remember, somebody was standing here, Chris Willey, possibly it was. The point being, I think you really need that if you're serious about getting effective recordings out to the public on YouTube. Thank you.
Can anyone answer that, Tom or Mary Ann?
We just haven't ordered them. If it's something the council wants, we look into it.
Well, I think we discussed this, I think we decided we wanted them.
Excuse me, it's my recollection that the council didn't vote, but they did heartily agree that that kind of efficiency improvement would be usful.
Yeah, or at least a couple of drop mics on both sides.
Or something better than what we did tonight.
No, I think personally, and I thought we had asked for it, so I guess now it's an official ask, but I think many people don't feel as comfortable getting up at the podium and speaking. And I think we would have better participation if we did have 2 portable mics or whatever the right number is. We would have more comfortable conversations personally. So I am definitely in favor, have been in favor of getting them.
There are a couple of just logistical situations with that too. I guess the first thing that was brought up was COVID, but perhaps we're putting that on the side now. And secondly, the care, who will be out there passing the mic around while this is going on.
David.
Those are just things, something to think about, that's all.
I think the issue here is these were changes to the charter that were made to broadcast meetings. And,
Oh, I'm not saying.
no, I know. I understand.
There be a drop mic or something like that, might be a little more efficient.
Right.
Trying to pass one around.
I know, but it was a charter change, a change to the charter that
Correct. And
had,
right, that's why we're asking people to go to the podium.
right,
That change.
so, thank you.
Any more texts?
Well, they've given up, they've given up texting. Okay, and maybe a dedicated, I know this is an easy ask, Millie, this is an easy ask, but a dedicated extension cord for computers up here, because I'm already running off my phone because my computer died. So, oh, I know, but just an extension cord, it's be fine. Thank you. Next item on the agenda tonight is to receive an update regarding the Rhode Island Department of Transportation visit. Mary Ann, I suppose?
So I think we have some good news here this evening for the community. About soon after I started back in January 2021, I reached out to Peter Alvidi, who is the director of RIDOT, with the help of our town engineer, Jim Jeremiah. And we had a meeting in May of 2021. We talked about a number of things. I also reminded him that in the agreement that we had with RIDOT, our 10-year agreement, was that they were supposed to provide us with the salt shed, which they hadn't done as of yet, and there was like 3 years left in the agreement. He said he would look into it, get back to us, and we fast forward, I got busy, got summer, and then back in April of 2022, I had another meeting with the director, and also town engineer was on it, and at that point, Matt Moynihan was on the meeting. And again, we discussed this, and then I took it further in the discussion with them regarding the roads on Block Island, some of the concerns I have with the roads, especially when I go out walking. I explained that we are a walking, a biking community. We have a lot of folks with young children, with strollers, folks running. And so he did say that he would assign a staff. He would get into it and look into it. RIDOT hadn't been out here for over 10 years. I specifically asked him at that meeting, I said, can you please assign a staff so that I have a person I can speak to? And there was a woman by the name of Pam Carter who was attending that meeting, and she is still there now and was then in the position of acting director of planning. So May 6th, they came. RIDOT did come here, and they came with PM and 3 other staff members. There was 4 staff members with them, 2 from planning and a gentleman from their safety team. And one of the members from planning was the pavement asset team leader. So we were fortunate enough, we got a van, and Mike Shea was our dedicated driver for the day, and he took us all around Block Island. And as Mike was driving, I noticed he was going on the other side of the yellow lines, and I kind of looked at him. He said, I want to make sure I hit every single bump on the island as we have the folks from RIDOT here, because they haven't been here in over 10 years. The first stop we did make was to the highway facility, and I did manage to call on Pam, and I said, Pam, no one should be working in this facility, and she agreed. Jim Jeremiah was with us that day as well as Mike. And Mike also showed all the culverts and drainage issues, as well as making sure he went over all the bumps. So they got back to us, and the news they got back to us is very encouraging, I think. What they have decided is that they have decided to allocate $15 million for what they call for safety. The $15 million includes $13 million for paving and another $2 million for guardrails. They've also including another $5 million for a highway facility. We finally are getting a highway facility. In the process of speaking with them with the highway facility, we explained to them we wanted employee housing on this highway facility. They informed us that they could not do that because obviously federal funds can't be used for housing for Block Island. We then said to them, that's fine, we'll bring it to our voters and get the approval. However, we want you to design the building as if we would have housing on the second floor. And they agreed to do that. The timeline on this is the design will start taking place in the fall of 2023 with construction in fall, spring of '24. I want to be specific with this. It's strictly paving. It is drainage work. It is culvert work. It's the state roads, and it's also guardrails. It does not include bike paths. It does not include walking trails or anything like that. I would like to remind the council that we also applied in collaboration with RIPTA and 29 other cities and towns to participate in a joint grant application for what they call Safe Streets and Roads for All. And that grant has been submitted, and we're waiting to hear back from that. That's a collaboration. That particular grant addresses things like bike paths. So the good news that I have for the council and the general public is tonight is RIDOT has allocated $20 million to this community. They haven't been here in over 10 years, and this is just wonderful news that I think the community as a whole should be very pleased with and celebrating. So I'm really happy that, and thanks to Mike, who's been involved with this, also Tom, as well as Jim Jeremiah. And this just goes to show when you're dealing with state agencies, sometimes it doesn't happen right away, that it takes you a good 13, 14, 15 months before you get to where you want to be. And then you got to go through the planning and the process of the financial piece of it. So I'm really pleased with where we are and really appreciate all the dedication and the help and PM Carter has done going through this project. And we'll be working with her an awful lot, I think, in the months to come. So.
Thank you, Marianne. Did you guys get a chance to discuss crosswalks at Baby Beach?
Those aren't part of this project.
Okay.
The crosswalk is Baby Beach. What we need to do is submit a letter to the State Traffic Commission to see if they'll allow us to do that.
Okay.
And that's strictly a letter.
Council have any comments?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say congratulations. I mean, $20 million is pretty impressive. And
Yeah.
I wish it were sooner, but hey, if we can get fall in, what's that, a year and a half, have that work started, that's a big deal. And hopefully if it's done right, we won't hear from David Lewis all the time about certain roads in the southwest corner of the island, but that's a good thing. That's a good thing. So congratulations.
That's a really, really good thing.
Well, you can't not say congratulations. We've been waiting for good news like this. But that said, we have got to widen our roads. You talked about Block Island being a safe walking and biking community. It's not safe, or a biking and walking community. It's an unsafe walking and biking community. We have to first thank them, and then second, sit down with them again and see how we can redesign, or part of the design before any pavement is put down involves widening at least some sections of our road that we know are a problem and have been for decades.
Thanks, Mark. Bill?
Yeah, I think that's great news to hear on those funds, and I understand from dealing with federal money that there's restrictions on it, so while you may not be able to do the bike lanes, we definitely want to take advantage of maximizing the roads. So
Thanks, Bill.
One of the things that occurred to me is that the standard for, merely by repaving, we might get significantly more shoulder because the standard in code, I don't know whether code applies to roads, but I think the standards now reflect a lot of what you've been saying, Mark. I think.
I'll just highlight our trip I took with Dr. Bowdy quite some time ago to Nantucket. They made a commitment. That's what they did first. And incrementally, when monies were available, they widened sections of the road. When that section was widened, everyone said, this is fantastic. Why aren't we doing more? And as more money became available, they widened more sections that were troublesome. So we got to start the process out here. It's unsafe to walk and bicycle and stroll that beautiful child on a large part of the roads on Block Island.
Any more public comment?
I just think it would be really nice to celebrate. We got a lot.
Yes, it's extraordinary.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And finally, after how long of waiting for sidewalks, we got sidewalks. And now everybody's scratching their head, were sidewalks such a good idea? Because now it forecloses the possibility of a bike path in some sections.
Oh, no,
So
they ride
things
their
have
bikes
to
on the
really
sidewalks.
have to be thought out a little bit more. Okay?
Yeah. They do ride their bikes on the sidewalks.
Oh, God, I don't complain when they do. It's more safe. Yeah. And it's illegal.
Electric bikes. Cool. Thank you.
I just don't want to, I don't want to see a car run over a stroller before we finally say, why aren't we widening our roads?
Thanks, Mark. And also, I know Marion mentioned that Mike was there, and Mike, you're kind of like the silent guy out there that makes all this happen. So thank you for that. Thank you for the things you do for the roads and everything that might go unnoticed but still gets done. So I'd like to thank you for that. And
It only gets noticed if it doesn't get done.
yeah, right.
That's government work.
As you heard earlier, the DPW job's available, so maybe you could consider that. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is discuss and act on the board committees, commission and committees. Oh, Coast Guard Station. Sorry, next item on the agenda is discuss and act on the Coast Guard Station tenant. I wasn't here when this was discussed, but I believe there was no action added to that discussion. I spoke to Mark about it. Mark, did you add this to this agenda?
I don't have that document in front of me.
I as well.
I thought that would be in the packet if we were going to act on it, but I'm prepared to act on it.
So, can I provide an update?
Good.
And so what happened at a meeting, Andre, during your absence, the discussion came up about Mark Tilson and his rental. He asked for an extension until December of 2024. The council then said to me, see what you can work out with Mark and have a conversation and stuff like that. So I did. So what happened was I did speak with Mark. We had a conversation. What Mark has agreed to is that we will allow him to stay in the Coast Guard facility until May 1st of 2023, and he'll move to the motor pool from May 1st, 2023 till December 31st, 2023. So with that said, what needs to happen at this point is the town council and the solicitors have asked that this happens, that the council authorized the solicitor to terminate the contract agreement prior to November 1st, 2022. The reason for that is the contract that Mark Tilson is currently in, unless we formally terminate it by November 1st, it continues for another full year. So what the solicitors have advised is that the council makes that vote to formally terminate it so that it doesn't automatically renew. And then they also authorize the town manager to enter into a short-term agreement with Mark to expire on 5/1/23. So those are the two things that we're looking to do.
try to straighten all that out.
Mhm.
So he's agreed to move from the Coast Guard facility to the motor pool till the end of next year,
But he won't do that until May,
okay?
and then until December 31st of next year.
And describe, will he continue all his duties during that time at the Coast Guard station?
He'll continue his duties at the Coast Guard Station through the May 1st timeline. At May 1st, the gentleman that we have selected to take over from Mark will move into the Coast Guard Department, what we'll call the Coast Guard Department,
Mhm.
and he will then take over those duties. The two of them have been working a little bit hand in hand through the fall and stuff like that, because we've asked that Philip get acclimated to what's going on out there.
And that gentleman's the assistant harbor, or the assistant harbor master, is that right?
Correct.
Who
Next
was here
summer,
with
he'll be
Kate.
the assistant harbor master, and if I'm not mistaken, he's been hired, I'm not mistaken, I know, he's been hired to fill in as a substitute for the dispatching at the police station.
Good. I'm glad you worked this out, Mary Ann. Nice.
So, great. So what we have to do here this evening is to, like you said, terminate the lease, or whatever that is, ends November 1st, and then authorize you to enter into a new lease. And all parties are amenable to all this?
Yes.
Okay,
It's to authorize the solicitor. Solicitor is the one that's terminating the lease.
okay, hold on. Bill?
What's the, on the motor pool, what's the setup with the state police and is it 2 units or 1 unit? I remember back when they had taken over, I'm sure it's changed since then.
It's kind of 1.5 unit, I guess was the way to describe it. There's separate kitchen areas in a couple of different areas. And then also we have funding of it in the budget to do some work at the motor pool.
So this won't have any impact on the state police housing?
No. We don't anticipate it having any impact.
The only reason I say this, the original lease that we had when I was involved in the time was that they would have that entire area up there. And that was quite some time ago, but I just want to make sure that doesn't impede anything with us having, state police on, housing for state police.
Thank you, Bill. Yeah.
I'll make a motion to authorize the solicitors to terminate the current agreement prior to current housing agreement with Mark Tilson prior to November 1st, 2022.
Second. Yeah, go ahead, discussion.
Seconded by Andre. Discussion?
I wanted to say one thing, because we haven't mentioned her name. The work that Charlene did on this, I think, was really valuable too. I know this was a challenging thing to settle, and I know you guys worked hard on it. And it's to get everybody agreeing to a solution, I know was not easy. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Thank you both.
Any other comments? Okay, motion made and seconded. Keith?
Yes.
Martha?
I'm in favor.
Andre? Mark?
Aye.
Aye, and aye as well. Passes unanimously. Second one, authorize the town manager to enter into a short-term lease agreement with Mr. Tilson to expire on 5/1/23.
Second.
Seconded by Andre. Any comments? Any comments from the public?
I'm just curious, what is the rent that? I mean, it's a town property, right?
Yep.
I think we kept the rent the same that it was before, that he had before.
What was that?
I think it's $400. Yeah.
Going from his apartment to the motor pool.
I'm sorry, $250 a month.
$250 a month.
Yeah, that's what he had previous. Amy, is that right?
It's in the regular.
Okay.
That's how he was compensated.
Yeah, but exactly, and he has to do the work. He has $250 a month, the regular contract that he has now.
So $250 a month, but will no longer be doing any of the maintenance on the.
He will be continue doing the maintenance on the property. Yes,
So up until May 1st,
Up until May
he's doing the
1st.
same job. Hold on a minute. Molly, you okay? Okay.
I just think it's the best deal in town, but okay.
So after May 1st, it's 250 with no work.
We haven't gotten.
We haven't gotten that agreement done yet in the motor pool.
So the rent for the motor pool hasn't been established yet.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
But we'll be presented the lease for approval, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Molly has a lot of chores down there, just FYI, in addition to that. Pedestrian rent. Mhm.
Motion made and seconded. Any other comments? Keith, how do you vote? Yes. Martha?
I'm in sorry.
Go on.
I'm in favor.
Mark?
Aye.
I'm in favor as well. Thank you.
Give me my agenda back.
Here you go. Your agenda.
Give me the agenda.
You
back.
got it back.
Thank you.
And Marianne, you're going to talk about the lease from May 1st to December 31st and come back to the council, so we won't do any third thing.
Correct.
Good.
Item number 9, discuss and act on boards, commission, and committees. A, accept a resignation from Steve McQueenie in the commission, from the Commission on Motor Vehicles for Hire. We have a letter from Stephen McQueenie, the town council. As you probably know, after 40 years, I have sold my home and will soon depart the island. I therefore submit my resignation for the Commission on Motor Vehicles, the last of the many boards I have had the honor to sit on. Steve McQueenie. I will make a motion to accept this resignation of Steve McQueenie from the Commission on Motor Vehicles for Hire.
Seconded with a huge thank you for all the years of service.
Motion was made and seconded. The only comment I would have was the town sent Mr. McQueenie a letter of appreciation and thank you. All those in favor? Keith? Martha? Aye. I'm in favor. Sven?
Aye.
And Mark?
Aye.
Motion carries. B, discuss and act on the possible vacancy on the Historic District Commission. Is there a possible vacancy on the Historic District Commission?
Yes, we have someone who has not attended for quite some time.
Okay. Do we have a letter or anything?
No, we don't. But I think it may be getting to a point where we need to take action because they're having quorum issues. So I don't know how that works.
The clerk would, who's the clerk of the Historic District?
John, the land use officer has made
Has
several
been, yes.
attempts to.
I think at the next meeting, we would have that put before us and then make that decision. Well, you could do it now, but we don't have anything in front of us, we don't even have a name.
Yeah. So what we have to do is notify the current member who is no longer attending that that person is no longer a member by virtue of non-attendance.
3 meetings.
Yeah.
Well, that's,
I know that's not stuck to, but it's been more than that.
no, it's not stuff, it's not the law.
It's not.
No, I think it is, it's not. It's like the don't drive barefoot isn't a law. He's not even listening.
Yes, he is. He's a policeman, he has everything.
You know, it's, you have, you miss 3 meetings without notification, you notify them. Has that been done?
That's correct, yes.
Martha, being a member of that committee, how would you like us to move forward?
Up to me. We've got to, somehow, somebody has to reach out and get somebody has to reach out and get a letter from him. That's the cleanest way to do this.
And provided we don't get a letter back, how do we move forward? So what do we need to authorize the town?
There is a
clerk to-
dispute within the family about whether this person is going to come back to the island.
Okay.
So we're trying
So-
to deal with it as
Nicely.
kindly as we can.
Okay, so, I think we need to do whatever we need to do to not involve ourselves in any family disputes over the Historic District Commission. So, do we need to make a motion to authorize a letter, or can the clerk handle this, or I think after a month, if the letter goes
Perhaps
out from the clerk.
Perhaps the clerk could write a letter.
I think the clerk could write a letter.
Yes, certainly. I mean, is the letter to what is the letter saying? That,
I don't even know the story.
that we're going, that the council will potentially.
Keith, why don't you work with Millie?
I'll work with Millie.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think I would say, as a practical matter, when you've missed this many meetings, as a matter of policy, you're no longer on, please let us know if that's not the case. And we'll press on. That, I think, is
Chairman, I appreciate those sentences.
yes.
3 sentences. Short and sweet. Okay,
It's been
Yeah.
we good?
Yes.
We good with that topic? Historic district drama. Martha, how could you? Martha, that's your committee.
Well,
Next.
Item number C is to appoint members to the School Building Committee, 2 one-year terms, knowledge of educational mission and facility function, community member with architectural, engineering, or construction experience. We have a letter, or I'll go through the law, I guess, pertaining to School Building Committee makeup, and the school building committee must at minimum consist of 8 people, including the superintendent of schools, at least 1 member of the school committee, the local official responsible for building maintenance, a representative of the office or body authorized by law to construct school buildings in the municipality, the school principal from the subject school, a member who has knowledge of the educational mission and function of the facility, a local budget official or member of the local finance committee, and at least 1 member of the community with architectural, engineering, and/or construction experience to provide input relative to the effect of the project on the community and to examine building design and construction plans for reasonableness. And we have a note from the superintendent. Please appoint the following ex officio members to serve in due to the capacity of their office. Robert Girardi, school superintendent. Charlie Weber, school.
we've already done this.
What?
So the ex officios have been appointed. The question is the 2 new, or potentially 2 or more new members. bringing the
2
committee.
one-year terms with knowledge of the educational. Okay, so I'm confused. Thank you for that clarification. So we need to appoint 2 one-year terms with knowledge of educational mission and facility function. And 1 with a community member with architectural. Okay.
And we've got a few letters.
We have some letters. We have a letter from Lisa Robb. We have a letter from Bill Pageon, and we have a letter from Lionel Butterfield.
So if I can ask, one question would be, it's, I believe you read, consists of 8 people at a minimum.
Yes.
And we have 3 people, which would make it 9, which is a solution, or pick 2 of those 3, I guess.
What's the council's pleasure?
Well, I mean, I think if, you know, the certainty for me is Lisa Robb. Only because she's here.
Because she's staring at you right now?
Only because she put up with me for a year and a half.
Only
on
so your
charter
tires
review.
don't splash on the way.
But if it doesn't disrupt the apple cart, I mean, if we have 3 people who are willing to attend all those meetings and serve, I'd be fine with having 9 instead of 8. The statute says 8 at a minimum.
Well, isn't it
That's
best
my
to have
opinion.
even an odd number anyway?
Well, doesn't mean people are gonna all show up.
I mean, if, as I said to Jess Willie, if they're having 4 votes, we have real problems.
But it does bring quorum from 4 to 5.
Yeah.
That's the only negative of going to 9. I see.
Yeah.
You're gonna go there and cause problems?
I think having an odd amount is kind of good for the voting purposes.
Atta girl.
Finding a quorum of 5 versus 4.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to appoint Lisa Robb, Bill Pageon, and Lionel Butterfield to the School Building Committee.
Second.
seconded by Sven. All those in favor? Keith?
Yes.
Martha? I'm in favor. Mark?
Aye.
And Sven.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thanks for coming.
You're safe, Keith.
This is always nice when people who ask to be on committees actually come to the meeting to be appointed. And stay. And stay. Keyword, and stay.
Now, Lisa, you're supposed to say yes to the next one, too.
What is the next one?
Let's see. All right, so, item D is to announce the vacancies. We have, which, hang on, Millie always provides the,
Dear Task
no, I know, but this, all right. This Dear Task Force, I have that, I'm just, Dear Task Force, Commission on Motor Vehicles for Hire, I've said this for so many meetings that I don't need the note, must be a non-taxi license holder. And 3, the Police Advisory Commission. That's been advertised for, has that been advertised for a month? Police Advisory?
The police advisor, yes, absolutely.
And Molly, is that your, have you resubmitted? Okay. So there really is a spot, that's all, truly. There really is a spot. Okay, thank you. Item number 10 is to approve the minutes from October 3rd, 2022, October 5th, 2022, open and close, and October 6th, 2022. I will make a note that if council has any questions, comments, changes, or deletions to the closed session October 5th, we will have to go in closed session to do so. Is there any, council have any issues with the October 5th closed sessions?
No.
Make a motion to approve the minutes of October 3rd, 2022, October 5th, 2022, open and closed, and October 6th, 2022.
Second?
Seconded by Sven. Any comments on the minutes? Hearing none.
Millie nailed it.
All those in favor? She always does.
Yep.
Mark? Aye. I'm in favor. Sven?
Aye.
Martha?
Aye.
Keith?
Yes.
Did you read them?
Certainly skimmed them.
Motion will carry.
Yay.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you, everybody, for coming and remaining.
Lisa and Molly get an award.
It's the biggest crowd.